So as I've been observing this generation, now almost 4 years in, by the way, which it's kind of hard to believe it's already been 4 years. That'll happen actually in November. So about a month and a half from now, really, we'll have completed 4 full years with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. But something that keeps happening still in this generation is I'm constantly reminded of the previous generation with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, more so the PlayStation 4 at this time. And in fact, I am starting to wonder if this generation that we're in right now, again, 4 years in, could end up being the longest generation that we've ever seen. And I had some thoughts around why I think that is going to happen, and we'll go over that here today. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So we did have PlayStation 4 in general continue to get ports, even ported backwards, like Jedi Survivor recently released, and I think it went over better than people were necessarily expecting. I mean, they even managed to get the entire game on the disc itself, whereas with the PS5 and the Xbox Series, even if you have the physical disc, you still have to download additional 50 gigabytes or something because the game itself is just too large, even for a 100 gigabyte disc, Blu-ray disc that we have on the PlayStation 5. And that seems to be becoming more and more common, and I don't think you're going to see as many publishers take the route that Square Enix does, where they will just ship with 2 Blu-rays if they have to make sure it's all there physically. They'll just make you download the rest of it outright, and they'll save some money that way. But still, the PlayStation 4 continues to just get games consistently now. Games you wouldn't even necessarily expect, like Jedi Survivor, like Resident Evil 4 Remake, and so on. And now we're starting to see games stretch the PlayStation 4 life even further. So we've already talked a little bit about some games for the PS4 even showing up and being announced for 2025 next year. And to be fair, we're like 3 months away or something, right, from next year. So 2025 actually isn't even that far away. But now we're starting to hear 2026 with that PlayStation 4 logo popping up. So we had Level 5's event recently happen. That was earlier today. And in this event, they did showcase a bunch of games. Some we've already seen, others brand new announcements. One in particular did put the PlayStation 4 release in 2026. That was Inazuna 11 RE or Re. It's supposed to be like a remake here of the first game. But yes, it is a PlayStation 4 game, PlayStation 5, Switch, and PC through Steam, 2026. That means that we will be seeing the PlayStation 4 still rolling along, 13 years after it was released. Now, the PS2 did continue to at least get, I think, FIFA, and that was still ongoing into, I want to say 2014. So that was roughly a 13 and a half to 14 year life cycle for that system. And the PlayStation 4 is starting to creep up there now. All right. And a lot of this has to do just with the fact that we have shared architecture. So it's not as much of a task necessarily to port backwards as we saw with Jedi Survivor, and even technically RE4, as that was a late announcement for it that it would have a PS4 version. And with that and the diminishing returns, we see the current effect with PlayStation. They've told us it's getting harder and harder to get people to move to the newer system with the PS5. As just a few months ago, they said that half of their user base still on PS4, the other half on PS5. Okay, so we have these diminishing returns. We have people who are mostly okay with their console now because maybe all they do is play Fortnite or any of the different sports games that we know above all else will stretch out that last-gen system as long as possible. So I'm starting to wonder about this current generation, the PS5, the Xbox Series. More so the PS5, though, because Microsoft has sort of made it apparent at this time they're kind of ready to move on from this gen, and they've had a harder time. We see it in the sales numbers and the placements and stuff. They're just having a harder time selling the hardware compared to Sony, who is selling the PS5 close to what the PS4's trajectory was. They're off by like 1 million or 2, but for all intents and purposes, it is there, even as a more expensive system overall with that sticker price. But we're technically a year behind with the PS5 Pro showing up a year later, right, in the generation. And then I'm looking at this like, okay, well, people are looking at that PS5 Pro. They're looking at the price tag, and they just don't really see the value necessarily in it. And a lot of that is just the fact that it makes your games look better. That's something we've sort of seen companies rely on with next generation for these high-end machines. The games typically are shown to look and run just better. but that doesn't seem to be something that is a big selling point as much anymore. And I don't think it will be for something like the PlayStation 6 or whatever Microsoft does. I think they have to think outside of the box for how to present something that would increase the value of that over the current platform. And because the PS5 right now is part of that like diminishing return segment where visuals are starting to cap off, whether it's just because budgets in general are getting out of hand and studios have to scale back a bit, or the fact that it's just getting harder and harder to tell the difference between this is 4K upscaled, this is 4K less upscaled, and then this is just like clean 4K, like native. People are looking at that going, I don't really see the difference. I'm going to stick with my base PS5, even though it's 2035 now. And this is something I'm wondering, could we potentially be in the midst of a 13 to 15 year life cycle right now, and we're just 4 years in? And that is an interesting one to consider, because it felt like that back when the Xbox 360 and the PS3 came out, 2005, 2006, I mean, that ran to 2013, and that felt like a very long life cycle. It did. And I mean, if you look at that from the PS4 and the Xbox One to the PS5 and the Xbox Series, that was also about a 7-year life cycle. But the fact that we still see the PS4 showing up now in these trailers with new games, it makes me think that, wow, that is an ancient system at this point. But because it has that mechanical hard drive, there are limitations when it comes to the SSD being expected, say, in the PS5. But when we go to the PS6, you're not going to have that jump with the SSD, which it can be game-changing for many different titles, and at times impossible to do on the PS4 with their vision. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a hang-up, with the PS6. Okay, well, we don't have that. We don't have the visuals necessarily to like put out there as the big selling point. Maybe some more immersion stuff. That's been brought up on the Click R3 podcast with Ryan. Oh, maybe they're going to do more stuff with their controller. Sure, that could be something. But I feel like they have to really show up with something like groundbreaking to get people to move over. Or I really think as long as Fortnite is active on the PS5 or Apex Legends or these sports games, people will just kind of hang out with that system, and that could cause an even slower transition to the PS6, which would make this current generation probably the longest one we've ever seen in history. And I really think it's possible it could be a 15-year life cycle, just all things like all in with cross-gen, and it might even come down to it being an 8 to 9 year cycle before the PS6 shows up. It would be crazy to think that we could be in 2029 and finally getting to the PS6. But it wouldn't shock me, because at that point, Sony is making a lot of money off software. People aren't necessarily clamoring for 8K. Let's see if we can figure out while people continue to buy software for our systems, or just play free-to-play games. We collect a big check on all those microtransactions by default. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Do you think it's possible that this current generation is longer than maybe we're predicting now, if it going to, say, 2028? Could it actually end up being a longer cross-gen period, and we could find ourselves with that PS5 logo next to different games as late as 2035? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.